Everybody, and we are working in the book of Daniel. Tonight we will be spending most of our time in Revelation, and if Kevin's not going to be here, I hope he's watching, or that he does watch, because he was really interested in the Revelation-Daniel connection. So we'll be spending most of our time in Revelation tonight, chapter 13. There's a lot of moving parts going on here, and this was a bear, not Persia, but a bear of a lesson to get together. But if I had hair, I'd have been pulling it out quite a bit, trying to get this stuff organized to be able to give a coherent presentation. But let's see how it worked. You be the judge. So let's pray, and we'll get going. Heavenly Father, we come to you giving you thanks for this day and for the hope that we have for the future. We thank you for your deep love that you have for us and for the grace that you extend if we are honest with you and sincerely doing the best that we can to serve you, correcting those things that need to be corrected because we trust in you and want to be like Jesus, our teacher. We thank you for this opportunity tonight for us here at Issaquah to spend these few minutes considering the book of Daniel and its connection to the book of Revelation. And we pray, Lord, that it will be a fruitful study and that we would be rewarded with a deeper faith, a deeper trust in you. Through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so this is my only slide tonight because I don't know how to PowerPoint this. It's just so much going on in the text here, and so we're going to put our attention in the text, and we have represented here these nations, the animals that represented them, both in Daniel 7 and in the book of Revelation. They're going to be a little bit different, but the same. And we'll see how all that works out. And so we're going to get started tonight by going into Daniel 7 again. And I'm just going to kind of pick up where we left off last week a little bit. And I'm just going to look at verses 9 and 10 of Daniel 7. And here he says, I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing, and coming out from before him, thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. Just a little aside, does anybody have any idea why this throne has wheels? Why a throne would have wheels? Well, apparently, kings had their thrones often built with wheels because they would go from place to place, and they would go someplace to sit, and they would be able to take the throne with them. Just a little tidbit that I learned along the way. And so when they would go to hold court somewhere, they could actually take it with them. So, of course, we always picture, thrones like, down to the bedrock, and then boom, it's right there. It's not going anywhere. But that's an allusion to that kind of an idea there. So I thought it was interesting.
Hey, Daryl, quick question.
Yeah.
So it said there right at the end of 10, and the books, plural, were opened.
Yes.
So I think that is, in one book is the book of life, meaning listed in it are those who are saved.
Mm-hmm.
And the other book is those who aren't. That's my question. What's the second book?
Well, okay, I'm going to say this. This is our Western thinking. Okay, we
Okay.
want to know what. That's
Yeah,
how.
all right.
You see what I mean? That's how we
Bullet
think.
points, please.
Exactly. So there's a. So what's the second one? Okay. The idea here is that the evidence was presented. Now,
Okay.
the book of life's going to come up. It's going to come up in Revelation, and it's going to be in a passage in chapter 13, I believe, that is we're kind of going to be mirroring, paralleling here. So the book of life will come up. Those were written in the Lamb's book of life from the foundation of the world. Yes, it will. But here it's just the overall thought is that the evidence is presented. The court sat, the evidence is presented.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Get the picture.
Yeah. And so, of course, we see this kind of language also in Revelation 20, right? With the books and whatnot. So, okay. So what we have here is a judgment scene, okay, and at the end of this, look at verse 11. When I kept looking, because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking, I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. So Rome, this mouth, and we're going to talk about him tonight. Now, when I say we're going to do this or that tonight, I don't really know that we're going to get to it. I'm just saying it's in here, okay? So be aware of that. And so this is telling us that Rome was annihilated, okay? He's thrown into this fire. And, first of all, let's go back to Steve's question from last week about, what's kind of the main thought of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have Christians that are going to be severely tested. They're going to be persecuted. And we see this in the language, and we're going to look at the interpretation in chapter 7 before we go to Revelation 13. But they're going to be severely, severely tested. And they have to know that God is sovereign, not Rome, not the devil. It is God who is completely in control, and he's working out his purposes, and they have to persevere through that. And I am sure that if you've been around long enough, you have spoken or heard people speak of the book of Revelation as a book that is encouraging the saints to persevere. Don't give up. Be faithful until death. Right? They'll reign with him for 1,000 years. He keeps giving all these pictures to encourage them not to quit, because it's going to be hard for them. And that's what Daniel and Revelation are going to be talking about. Right? So last week we got into the summary of the vision in the first 7 verses of, or the first 12 verses of Daniel 7, and tonight we want to look at read the interpretation, and then Revelation is going to shed light on it. Okay, so that's what our agenda is to look at this interpretation and then look at it through John's eyes and look at Revelation through Daniel's eyes. Okay, so that's our goal. And again, the whole deal is, as we've talked about when we were looking at the chiasms, the very center. If we take the whole book of Daniel as a chiasm, the very center of it is verses 13 and 14. The Son of Man came to the Ancient of Days, presented himself before him, To him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion. Because we're going to be talking about kings and a king and kingdoms. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. Now, as compared to what? Now, we think about chapter 2, we think about the vision of chapter 7. These dominions were not everlasting dominions, but God's is, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, which comes across to me as compared to those earthly empires, God's kingdom is permanent. God's kingdom will never pass away. Now, if I need encouragement to persevere, I want to know that, right? I need to know that. So they're not just being told, be faithful until death, don't give up. They're being given reasons not to give up, reasons to do what they need to do in order to inherit the kingdom. All right, so Daniel 7, let's look at verse 15, and we'll look at the interpretation of this vision. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So here he goes. These great beasts, which are four kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. Now, by the way, how many kingdoms fell before Rome arose? 3. Okay? All right? And so I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them. Okay? So here's the allusion to the persecution until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Okay. Thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. Thus we have the interpretation. You got it all there? You got all that? Okay. Okay. So these four beasts, of course, are kings out of the earth. But he says in verse 18 that the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom for all ages to come. So this is what the first 14 verses of Daniel 7 mean. This is what they're pointing to. These four kingdoms will have their ages. They will have their times. But the kingdom that the saints would receive would last forever. This is the point, okay? Now, in verses 19 through 22, here we have the saints here mentioned again. And so what is the importance, or what is important, should I say, is that the saints of the highest one will receive and possess the kingdom. Okay? So this is how we're to understand this chapter. Four kings or kingdoms, and we'll see that when four kings rise, he's talking about the kingdoms over which they rule. Okay? And so four kings, four kingdoms, one eternal kingdom. Okay? Four kingdoms, one eternal kingdom. And of course, as we mentioned last week, Daniel was really interested in that fourth beast. It was different from the others. And I mean, I can understand why Daniel would be so upset. I mean, what a picture. This is coming, right? This kingdom is coming, and it's mean and it's powerful. It's no mercy, just trampling down its enemies, and is going to wage war against the people of God. Wouldn't you think that would be upsetting to? Yeah, Tony?
Who's giving this interpretation? Who's he talking to?
Who's
Daniel? Daniel's given the sum of his dream.
Right.
He's talking to someone.
And the angel is explaining this to Daniel.
An angel.
Yeah, this is the one who was there, and he asked him, what does all this mean?
Okay.
So he's the one that's giving the interpretation. Yes. Okay. So I could understand why, as Daniel hears this description of this horrible beast and how it's going to wage war against God's people and overpower them. I mean, what might he be thinking? What might he be feeling? It was obviously upsetting to him, because it says, at this point the revelation ended in verse 28. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming me, and my face grew pale. Okay? As he's hearing this description, from a divine being. It makes me think about the Cleopas and his friend on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus joins them there, and the story. But Jesus then explains everything about the Christ from the scriptures. I mean, wow! When finally Jesus reveals himself to them and then disappears, they've just walked 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and Jesus explains these things to them, and their hearts were burning when they were listening to him on the road. And then they immediately walked 7 miles back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples what they had just experienced. So just thinking about, if you have a divine being who is explaining the scriptures, explaining things to you, that must be quite an experience, one would think. And so Daniel is just completely, You know, he's afraid, he's alarmed, he's, you know, he's lost the color out of his face. You know, he's just really upset over what he's heard. And so, in the vision of Daniel 2, we had 5 component parts. Remember, we had the 4 kingdoms and the eternal kingdom, God's kingdom. Okay, and so chapters 2 and 7 are identical as far as the general sweep of history. They're talking about the same part, you know, the same historical period, etc. And so we're going to then go into a comparison now of Daniel 7 with Revelation 13. Are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to offer at this time? Okay, all right, very good. So far, we have been told merely what Daniel saw. Okay, he saw a vision. But in this, as we read that interpretation, Daniel himself kind of enters into that vision and becomes an active figure in it. He is seeing these things. He is experiencing these things as they're being interpreted to him, to the point where he has a physical reaction. So he's been drawn into this vision, and he's reacting to it in the way that we've described. So the Apostle John uses Daniel 7 as a basis for the theme of Revelation. So as we start the comparison, that's where we begin. John uses Daniel 7 as a basis for the theme of the Revelation. All right. So in the providence and the process of inspiration, God provides for us the book by which we interpret Revelation, and that's the book of Daniel. Okay. Now, we can understand Daniel, I say cautiously, seeing it from a historical viewpoint in the rise and fall of these nations. That we can see that. That's pretty understandable, right? The nations had their time, and then another one absorbed them. You know, it didn't completely annihilate them, because they went on for a period of time, but they took dominion over them, and you know, one after the other, after the other. But seeing Revelation through Daniel's eyes helps to clear up some of the problems with understanding the book of Daniel. So Daniel and Revelation blend together in just a perfect unity of revelation. Okay, so that's what I want us to see, but even more importantly, the message that is being set forth. So the second half of the book of Revelation contains descriptions or depictions of terrible persecution, as we're going to see in chapter 13, and devastating judgment upon the forces behind that persecution. Just as we've seen already, Rome thrown into that fire that was proceeding from the throne of God and being completely destroyed and annihilated. There are some interesting characters in this section of Revelation. For example, the woman in chapter 12, the dragon, the man-child, the sea beast, the earth beast, the lamb. Some very interesting characters that we have in this section of the book. But all of these perform specific activities in this conflict between Satan and the church, because that's what it's going to boil down to. Okay? And so we've probably done this little mental review in the past, but it's worth repeating in this context. So Satan, or the Satan, which is more the proper way I understand from my deep studies, right from the very beginning, did not want the church to come into existence. All right? So way back in Jesus' birth, the time of his birth, he attempted to use Herod to have Jesus killed. Okay? And again, we have to remember that we're talking about the spiritual realm and these spirit beings. And so Satan, I don't know, I'm not going to give him any attributes of knowing the future or this or that, but I do know he attempted to kill Jesus by using Herod. He knew what he was doing. So that didn't work. And so Jesus then comes into his ministry, and he has his ministry for 3 years or so. Started when he was 30, his ministry. And then Satan used the Roman government to put him to death. Right? So he thought that he had accomplished his task of preventing the establishment and the existence of the church. But what happened? Jesus rose from the dead, established his church. So what's he doing now? In this context, he is trying to destroy the church now that it's established. Okay? So everything that's going to be going on here is going to be under Satan's direction. And you're going to see this real clearly in the language. All of this is under Satan's direction. And his goal is to, we'll see what it is. I won't get ahead of myself here, but you'll see exactly what his goal is going to be. In Revelation 12, there is a redundant message that we hear over and over repeated. And the message is that Satan is a defeated enemy. Okay? No matter what he tries, it doesn't work. And so, but he's still trying to get people to follow him. Okay? Chapter 14 shows the victory of those who do not bow down to Satan. Because as we'll see, to bow down to a Caesar, specifically Nero, that we're going to be talking about, or whom we're going to be talking about, if you bow down to the Caesar, and Satan gives that monster nation its power and authority, then you're actually bowing down to Satan. See that? Okay? Because this is all orchestrated by him. He's the one at the bottom of it. And so chapters 12 through 14 of Revelation are a unit, and they kind of convey the whole picture of the rest of the book of Revelation. But we're going to be focusing in Revelation 13. So let's go to Revelation 13. Okay. Questions, comments? Revelation chapter 13. All right. So, you have to, this isn't easy stuff here, so you have to kind of keep in mind what we've been talking about from Daniel 7, kind of the picture that we started out with in the sea and the nations rising out of the sea and those things that we've been talking about there. So, let's look in Revelation 13, and I'm going to read I think down to verse 6 at this point, okay? And the dragon has been identified as Satan, okay? And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. We're in Revelation 13.
12, 13. Aren't you in chapter 12, verse 13?
No, 13.
13:1.
This starts out
But that
as
doesn't sound
beast.
that way.
Well, he said dragon, this says beast.
Oh,
Oh, same, thing. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. And the dragon, or the beast, stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming out of the sea. All right. Where did Daniel see those animals coming out of? Out of the sea. Okay. Having 10 horns, we've heard that, and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. Have you heard those? Okay. But you're going to see it's used a little bit differently here, but we'll point out why. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. The dragon gave it, okay? I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshiped the dragon, okay, and here's the point that I made earlier. They worshiped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? A sidelight here, it says here that because he gave, the dragon gave his authority to the beast. Now, I want you to think about what Jesus said to Pilate. When Pilate said, I have the power to release you. And remember what Jesus said to him? Okay. You would have no authority unless it was given you from heaven. Right? And couple that with Acts 2. I don't remember the verse right now, but Peter said that by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God, Jesus was handed over, kind of a fuzzy paraphrase at the end there, but he was handed over to ungodly men, etc. So whatever is happening, the authority of the beast, that came from God. God is, now that might sound strange. Well, why would God do all this? And that's okay. See, one of the things I really want to teach you to do is when you hear something that sounds weird, say it's weird. Okay? Just say so, because that's when the Bible gets alive to you. When you look at these things, I don't get that. Why? Okay? So anyway, I'm not going to answer the question right now, but that is a weird thing. Okay? But anyway, the point that I want to make is that God is the one is in control. I mean, that's just in every word almost that we see. It's in the background. Okay. Okay. So they worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. They worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war against him?" There's a remez, I think, pretty clear. Now, remember the remez is you have the surface reading, and then the remez is where you look back at what it's alluding to. And in Micah chapter 6, it says, who is like God? Okay? Who is like God? So you see the play here. Now it's like, who is like the beast? Okay? And so if Micah says, who is like God, and here, who is like the beast, what is the message John is putting forth here? What's the comparison? See, who's God? Who does Rome want to be? They want to be God. See, who is like Rome? Okay, and so anyway, so there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act. Okay, authority to act was given him. To wage war, to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies. against God and to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. All right. Yes.
I'm confused where God's giving the beast his authority. Verse 4, it says, and they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. So Satan.
Yeah, that was Satan. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so
yeah.
is there any place in here where God, or was that where you're just making a comparison to?
Yeah, before I was just making a comparison that,
Okay.
that God gave Pilate authority to do what he was doing,
Okay.
and that God is in control.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here it's, the beast is giving, okay.
Yes,
So
yeah, the
dragon,
beast giving
Satan
authority
the
to,
beast.
yeah,
Okay.
to, all right. Okay, so let's take what we've read so far and talk about this a little bit, okay? So in Revelation 13, we have two beasts. Now, why do I say that? So the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea, all right? So here we have the dragon and we have a beast. Okay, so this is what we call the sea beast. Okay, and the some look at it as the enforcer of emperor worship. This beast we're going to be talking about, or Rome as false religion. One of the things when you're that makes me want to pull my non-existent hair out is that when you're researching this and you're reading and it's just nobody agrees on anything. I mean, man, one guy says this, another guy says that, and I'm trying to put a class together here. I need to have a direction. Help me out, guys. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of things where it could be this, could be that, but we don't want to get bogged down in those things. So in chapter 16 and 19 of Revelation, we read about the false prophet. In chapter 17, Rome is the great harlot, referring to this seducing power of Rome or worldliness. Okay, and so we have this beast coming out of the sea, and so having these 10 horns, and on its horn 10 diadems, as we read there. Okay, now. Okay, we're just going to have to read a little further in order to make this make sense. Okay, verse 7, 13:7. It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. Okay. So in verses 9 and 10 in that reading, the saints are to have patience or perseverance and faith. Okay. And the point of chapter 13 is to help them, and by extension us, to have that, to have those things. Okay, so Rome is going to be destroyed, as we saw in Daniel 7:11, and it's going to go into captivity. And in fact, those who live by the sword, as he describes here, must die by the sword. And so Satan has the false prophet, and this is why I mentioned them earlier. He has the false prophet. He has the harlot as the great harlot of chapter 12 as his allies, but still he's going to be brought to an end. Okay, everything that he's trying to do is going to be brought to an end. Okay, we good? Steve.
I've been sitting on this one waiting for the end of the class, but you said, go ahead and ask a question, so here I go.
Yeah.
So this, all that we're talking about right now seems to be alluding to Jesus and his kingdom for all times.
Yes.
That's the final kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So are we assuming in what we're talking about here that Revelation is not in any way dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem?
Oh, that question.
Oh, that question, because I've never been able to straighten it out. Some years ago, many years ago, Haverstock was in here.
Yep.
And he just pounded on the pulpit that Revelations is only, I'm sorry to be so distracting to
No,
your
no,
class.
it's fine, it's fine.
But he just pounded on the pulpit that if you don't see this as a destruction of Jerusalem, then stop it. Because that's what Revelations is about, is looking for the destruction of Jerusalem. And yet, always when I Revelations, I'm seeing this as a picture for me of the kingdom for all times that I can place my trust in.
Yeah.
And it's got little to do with destruction of Jerusalem.
Well, yeah, I mean, the picture that we have right now is we have those nations and then God's kingdom, right? And God's kingdom is eternal. And Rome is, Satan is using Rome to destroy and absorb God's people, but Rome is going to be destroyed.
Right.
So destruction of Jerusalem was Rome, or the persecution 25 to 30 years later was Rome. So you're really just talking about a date at that point, right? I mean, the application is still the same for us, that there were Christians persecuted
Yeah.
by Rome,
Mm-hmm.
and we take some general principles about judgment from it, but it was primarily to them about the persecution that was going on at that time,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was in 70 or 90,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right, right. So, yeah, and I have all of Larry's notes, you know. I mean, I went through and listened to his class, and I just typed not recently, this has been a long time ago, typed every word that he said. And
Boy, you did a lot of typing.
I did a lot of typing, yeah, every chapter, all the way through. And because I wanted to try to understand, because I was getting the same thing. You know, this is talking about destruction of Jerusalem. And there's some language in here that, okay, I see why you're saying that. But all I'm saying right now is that the picture that we have is 4 world kingdoms that when God's kingdom came, they all fell. All that whole system of one absorbing the other fell, an eternal kingdom. And Satan is using the Roman government, this nasty beast, to destroy God's people. That's the picture I've got.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe I shouldn't look at those notes. Yeah, because I really haven't. Because I have on my computer file, I have Revelation early date, late date, you know, and I got the full stuff on those. And so anyway, this is where, you know, and so we let's be open-minded, and we can, you know, I mean, yeah, okay, well, just stay tuned.
There we go.
Yeah, here we go, yeah. So I want you to notice here, as in Revelation 13, as he's seeing this vision, in verse 2, and we'll talk about these heads and blasphemous names and all that, but the beast which I saw, now this is a beast, it is a composite. In Daniel, it was 4 kingdoms, but here it's a composite, because those kingdoms at this point are gone, and there's one left, and that's Rome. And so here he's looking at this composite of this composite nation. And so I saw it was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. In Daniel, what was the first kingdom, as he's describing it, like a lion with wings. So he started with the lion, and then, let me look at this so I don't get it messed up here. So he first sees the lion, and then the bear, and then the leopard, right? So the lion, so Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, but he's looking at it from his standpoint, and so it's reversed. See? And so as he's looking at it, and so there's one left, and that nation is Rome, and he's taking Rome and looking at it as a composite of those nations. And so the idea is, as I mentioned before, of empire versus shalom. Empire, so shalom is God's kingdom, a kingdom of peace, a kingdom of self-sacrifice, as opposed to empire, which are kingdoms of self-preservation. Okay, and so this is how John is seeing the vision. Okay, and let's see. Okay, all right. So the fact that John talks about these animals, the leopard, the bear, the lion, and that they're coming out of the sea, like in Daniel 7, puts us in the context of Daniel 7. Okay? Because Daniel saw these animals come out of the great sea, and John is seeing this composite coming out of the sea. See? And so that puts us in the same context.
Right.
All right? Okay. So the statue, remember, of Daniel 2, the head of gold, Babylon, breast and arms of silver, Middle Persia, the belly of thigh and thighs of bronze, Greece, legs of iron, feet partly of iron, partly of clay, Rome. So here the same thing is repeated in Daniel 7, where he saw this vision and these same nations, right? But just pictured as animals instead of being pictured as parts of that statue. So the main thrust of the book of Daniel revolves around the coming of those 4 successive nations before the coming of the Messiah. Okay? The Messiah who will set up an eternal, everlasting kingdom. Okay? So the point here is that these beasts and horns represent kings and kingdoms. Okay? The beasts and the horns represent kings and kingdoms. Okay? So hopefully that will be borne out and made clear. Okay? Questions or comments? Okay. So as we notice Revelation 13:1, he talks about the beast coming out of the sea. And of course, sea is used by the prophets and here in Revelation to speak of the peoples, the nations in constant change. Like the sea is always moving, so with the nations. There's political changes and economic changes and moral changes, and so we see all of this movement. And one beast comes forth from this melting pot of nations with 10 horns. Now, yeah, this is Revelation 13:1. Okay, this beast coming out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns 10 diadems, and on the heads were blasphemous names. Okay, all right. So you might recall that in the Old Testament, horns symbolized what? Anybody remember? Power. Okay, they symbolized power. And so this beast that comes out of the sea here has 10 horns. That's a symbol of power. 7 diadems, which symbolizes royalty and authority. Okay, so this beast has authority, has power, and it has royalty. It has authority. Okay, and it says here that it has 7 heads. Now, this is variously interpreted. What do you think about this? That the having 7 heads I'm not sure about this one, but I don't have to be. I like that. I have a new attitude. I have a new attitude. I don't have to be sure. We're just studying here, right? But anyway, tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom as it conquers the world. Okay. And then the blasphemous names refers to taking names of deity that only belong to God. Okay. So you think about that, who was like God, and now who was like Rome. I watched myself do my last week's class, and I hear these ums coming out, and I don't like it. Okay, so I'm just saying, I don't like it. So we know that this beast is going to want to be worshipped. Okay, so blasphemous names, and this will develop out. Okay, we good there? Okay, Revelation 13.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you say the beasts and the horns represent kings and kingdoms,
Yeah.
are we talking about the four powers?
No.
Or what are kings?
No, because at this point they're gone.
Okay, so the kings and kingdoms are whatever came after? Or-
Yeah. These are the kings. Okay. We have to kind of arrest our way of thinking a little bit, okay? And just remember, this book is in symbols. So it isn't all this literal way that we think about it. They just represent kings and kingdoms. Leave it. Just leave it there. That's what we have to learn how to do. And then it will develop. The story will develop. And these things will become apparent. But they just represent kings and kingdoms, for right now. Okay, so in verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like those of a bear, his mouth was like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So, what nation, which is a composite of the three found in Daniel, which are the three leading up to the Roman Empire, would best fit this picture? In other words, I kind of just gave you the answer. But those three are gone. And so they were the ones that led up to, 1, 2, 3, and then a fourth kingdom came on the scene. And so I guess what I'm asking is, what kingdom best fits the picture of what John is seeing coming out of the sea? Okay, this strong, mean, crushing everything around it empire, and that would be, this is a nation that's being controlled and manipulated and used by Satan because Satan gives it its power. Well, there doesn't seem to me to be any question that that's wrong.
That's wrong.
Yeah. And most especially at this time, we're going to be dealing with this one king. We're going to be talking about this little horn that speaks great blasphemies, and it is at war with the saints and overpowers them and this thing. And so Nero fits that picture, the worst of those kings that was reigning at the time that this book was written. Okay? And so we're going to identify that little horn boasting great things as Nero. Okay? And I think that when Daniel describes this one horn that pulls up I think, if I'm getting this right, the language, that pulls up these three horns by the roots, that it can be that it's those three nations and then Rome tramples down, the whole thing. Or a comparison, because if you have one taking the place of three, that indicates or implies great power in comparison. So we can look at it that way, but this is where we're going. Now, here's where we have in verse 3 what is commonly agreed to be one of the most difficult statements in all of the book of Revelation, where he says, I saw one of its heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. Okay, so I didn't choose to go into any of the alternative explanations, but I will bring one, because I don't want to just skip over the verse and say nothing about it, but I will get what is commonly seen as the most reasonable explanation, because it really nobody agrees. It's just a hard verse. What does that mean? Okay. And so, Rome looking like it was dead, like it was gone, but then it came back, and it has to do with the emperors and certain things that happened amongst the emperors and whatnot, and exchanges of power, and looked like everything was gone, but then another emperor rises, and So anyway, we'll take a look at that just so we have a view of that. But hey, can you believe it? It's 8 o'clock. And I have learned that we're done at 8 o'clock and not 8:15. All right? So we'll pick up the story next time at Revelation 13:3. Yeah.
So I've been thinking throughout the class tonight, as we're talking about the final kingdom, the triumph over all of the wars and all of the bad stuff, that there is a final kingdom to be looked forward to.
That's right.
And so I'm sort of personalizing our study tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But even though you did not mention it in anything you were doing tonight, for whatever reason tonight, the word desolation has been just popping up in my mind the whole hour.
Mm-hmm.
And the word desolation is used certainly in Isaiah,
Yeah.
but it's used in Jeremiah, and it's used in Daniel.
Yeah.
And I think that word, desolation, I don't know if there's another more descriptive word
Yeah.
than what's waiting for the lost.
Yeah.
Whether it's what Isaiah was trying to tell, to the Jews, whether it's what Jeremiah was, they all chose to use that word, and Daniel does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that today, right now today, in the world we're living in, that we spend a lot of time talking about the reality of the waiting desolation for those whose names are not written in the book of life.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's a scary word.
It is.
And
It
I
is.
don't know if a bunch of people that I know who are not Christians are spending much time worrying about the coming desolation
No.
that
they're
was
not.
so loud in what's being talked about here.
Yeah.
These prophets going out, and just the people, Israel is just scared to death of going into this captivity, of going into desolation. It's no different for all of us today living here in Issaquah.
Mm-hmm.
There's folks that are heading for desolation. In
Yeah.
other words, this picture that's being painted in Revelations is very real.
Yeah. 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 And when you're in this scripture a lot, it just makes me, when you're walking around and you're looking around yourself at all the people coming and going, and I just think to myself that, at least the vast majority, this stuff that we're doing right here, this is so far outside of their realm.
Right.
You know, I can't even describe it. I mean, what we're talking about here, that,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
in the Bible in general, just the listening to God, inclining our ear, and learning from Him. It's just a foreign thought, you know. But, you know, as we get opportunity to mention these things to people, and, you know, maybe that can change for some, and that's what God's after. You know,
Amen.
so.